Welcome back to the channel. This is the Action Figure Grader, and it's that time of the week to cover the vintage collection. And this video might be a little bit different than usual because I wanted to talk briefly about an article that was on Jedi Temple Archives and some associated videos with that from vintage collection experts. But I'm going to dig into all that in a little while, but I got a few thank yous and shout outs to give. A couple of different Patreon members recently upgraded their membership amount, so I wanted to make sure to say thank you to them. Philip, Keen, and Benjamin, thank you so much for recently increasing your monthly Patreon membership amount. It's really kind of you and generous of you to do that. Thank you to all my Patreons for allowing this channel to be what it is today. And then I also had Sith Droid to say thank you to. He sent me another YouTube super. He sent a lot of money over the last few months, and I just want to say thank you to Sith Droid as well as everyone else who always sends me YouTube supers. Okay, before we dig into eBay sales for recent TVC sales on eBay, I wanted to talk about this article on Jedi Temple Archives. It's kind of old news. I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have already seen this news. This is from April 16th, and I'll put a link in the video description to this article on Jedi Temple Archives, but it sounds like Target has decided to discontinue selling the vintage collection. And it sounds like they just have not had much success. Obviously, there's been peg warmers, as you can see in this photo with Lando Calrissian, which is unfortunate, but here's what the article kind of generally says, and then we can kind of extrapolate from there. It seems like Target will no longer carry the vintage collection going forward. It does not, however, affect the Black Series. Target is still investing in the line and even continues to get exclusive figures like the recently announced Darth Maul holocron figure. But it's pretty interesting that the vintage collection is struggling at Target such that they're just going to no longer have Target exclusives or carry the line, in retail. And Victoria's Cantina, I'm sure all of you guys know Victoria's Cantina. She is a massive YouTuber. She had a very good video. It's like a live stream. It's not very long either, that just talks about why she thinks Target is dropping the vintage collection. And she mentions, figure selection, horrible peg warmers. To me, one of the big ones is overpriced deluxe series. That's a big one to me. Nobody really wants to buy these boxes that cost more, don't actually show the figure, the plastic-free packaging, because I would argue that the vast majority of vintage collection collectors are mint-on-card collectors, and maybe that's probably an overgeneralization, but certainly there are some people that open them up and like to display them and things like that, but overpriced standard vintage collection figures. Inflation, I think, is a big driver that people for 3 3/4 inch figures are not willing to pay these even higher prices. And I've seen that comment a lot, not only in my videos, but on Facebook and elsewhere, that people have just stopped collecting the vintage collection. And I'm certainly, for me, it was maybe not so much the price increases as it had more to do with space. I just don't have the space to collect vintage collection and vintage Kenner stuff, so I had to kind of make that choice to, unfortunately just stop collecting the vintage collection. As nice and as cool as some of those recent releases have been, I've just said, enough is enough. I just don't have the space for it. So, there's a lot of reissues, a lot of repaints and things like that, and maybe just the selection of characters maybe could be considered questionable by Hasbro. How much of that was dictated by Disney, who knows? But Victoria's Cantina's video really dives into it in a very succinct, good way. And again, I'll put a link also to her video, her recent video that was like a live stream cocktail hour that she usually does, along with this article. But, I think one thing that maybe this article doesn't talk about, that I've kind of hinted at over the last year or so, is, is the vintage collection going to go away eventually? Is the time where we see the really heady prices for TVC 1.0 is that starting to come to an end? You could make an argument that vintage collection prices are down, with some exceptions here and there, and that will certainly show in the upcoming kind of items that I'm going to talk about. But I just wonder whether the latest generation of kids, Generation Alpha or whatever, do they really even care about action figures? And, you know, just broadly speaking, from a collecting standpoint, is Star Wars going to have a slow death? And that's something that I made a video on a long time ago. Is the Star Wars brand dying? And I'll put a link to that video if you haven't seen it. It's a really old video, but I'll put a link to that video as well. But, you know, I think that Disney's running of the Star Wars franchise has had its hits, like The Mandalorian, like Andor, like Rogue One. It's had its misses as well, such as the sequel trilogy. You could argue that some aspects of the sequel trilogy were certainly not beloved by Star Wars fans. The Book of Boba Fett comes to mind. I would argue that potentially the Acolyte series that's coming out, that, you know, there's a lot of politics that I don't want to dig too much into that, because that's a whole separate topic. But you could argue, you know, that a lot of the politics related to the people that run Star Wars, and to a certain extent also the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that they're letting their politics maybe get in the way of telling a good story. I think all of those factors, combined with the latest generation of kids not really caring or playing with toys. It seems like the latest generation, it's video games like Roblox, like Fortnite, and maybe Lego. You know, are those kids, when they grow, like my kids' generation, my kids are 11 years old, when they get to be my age, are they really going to want to collect vintage Kenner or vintage collection? I don't think so. I really don't. So, you know, it is, quote unquote, investing or collecting Star Wars items a good investment? You know, I don't know if that's necessarily the case, and whether 20 or 30 or 40 years from now, as my generation is dying out, whether there will be demand for the Star Wars brand and Star Wars collectibles. Like, you could argue that the vintage Kenner line is doing pretty well right now in terms of resale prices, but I just think there's going to be, to a certain extent, potentially, not definitely, but potentially, there's going to be a glut of people in my generation that have either vintage collection or vintage Kenner stuff, and that supply will kind of hit the market in 20 to 30 years as our generation is starting to maybe retire or just don't have the space anymore, downsizing their homes after their kids leave college. You know, I do think that there's potential for that. And I'm not trying to speak doom and gloom to the Star Wars franchise. It's certainly a beloved franchise, but you know, this is the first sign that Star Wars action figures, regardless of scale, may eventually evolve into a more boutique or online-only fan channel toy line. A lot will hinge on the success of upcoming movies, and I do agree with that point in the article, that if Star Wars as a brand is not righted, if the ship is not righted, the franchise starts to have some hits in the movie theaters, we could see a slow dying of the Star Wars brand. And that's something that, again, I've talked about a long time ago, that, and I'll put links to all this stuff as well as my video on the dying of the Star Wars brand, that I would argue it's undergoing a slow death. There is some potential for that. So anyway, just go and check out Victoria Cantina's video, this article, and maybe my video talking about that. I just think it's food for thought. And again, I'm not trying to speak doom and gloom, but it's something that if you're putting mega dollars into your collection, be smart with it, and just give some thought as to maybe the speculative nature of buying these multi-thousands of dollars of items. You know, and just give some thought to it. And quite honestly, that might be part of the reason, subconsciously, that I've kind of divested away from not only the vintage collection, but towards maybe high-end comic books, just to give my collection what I think might have a little bit more diversification, because I do enjoy collecting very high-end graded comic books right now. And to me, it's just maybe not putting all my eggs in one basket with just Star Wars toys. So anyway, just food for thought. But let's go ahead and dig right into some vintage collection stuff. This seller has had some really nice stuff. You might want to check them out online. I've never bought from them, but they are located in my state of Tennessee. HLS Sales and Auctions. I don't know who this person is, but they have some beautiful, very nice high-grade TVC 1.0 that they've sold. And I put these in order of release in terms of the release numbers on the back of the card. But you'll see this seller come up pretty regularly because they've had some very nice items here lately. Dengar VC01. This is obviously punched. I don't even know if there's an unpunched example of Dengar, but this has got the rocket firing FET offer. And this was the U.S. card that sold for $90. Pretty decent deal there relative to maybe where this one was going for at this time last year. Power Droid had some beautiful vintage Revenge of the Jedi, vintage collection Revenge of the Jedi offer lists and with offers as well that he's kind of had stacked up in shelves in star cases. And he's been slowly selling these off. He's usually, Power Droid, again, I've bought from this seller. I don't know him personally, but he usually has high-grade AFA examples that's always sell for big money. But lately he's been selling some really nice Revenge of the Jedi type stuff. But he had an unpunched Revenge of the Jedi offerless Darth Vader. So obviously this is probably from the SDCC box set. That one sold for $100, which I thought was a pretty good deal there. Here was a Canadian example of the VC09 Boba Fett, and this was a Return of the Jedi offerless, unpunched, and the harder to find Canadian example. I sent this out to my Patreon supporters. I don't know if one of them bought it or not, but, you know, it wasn't a perfect card, but it was pretty nice. It had some very light edge wear to it, but tough to find those Canadian examples unpunched, and this was certainly one of those, and that one did sell for $200 in a buy it now situation. Here was a Darth Vader name pill unpunched VC13. That one sold for $130. And I thought that was a particularly good deal relative to where this one has sold in the past. The Revenge of the Sith, Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader name pill. I mean, I remember a few of these selling in the 200s this time last year. So prices have come back down to earth a little bit on some of these. And it was a very clean card as well. Probably worth every penny of $130 if you're into those kind of Anakin Skywalker name pill variants. VC17, again, this is another sale from that seller in Tennessee. This was the foil example of General Grievous Ultimate Galactic Hunt. It was listed for $120. Best offer accepted on that was $115. That's a very nice looking foil example. And then going back to Power Droid, he had an unpunched General Grievous with no offer on that one. That one was sold for $150. I thought that was a pretty good deal for an unpunched General Grievous U.S. card, just the standard release. And then here was the same General Grievous VC17, but this was a punched example with the rocket firing FET mail away offer, and this was an uncirculated 9.0. So somebody sent in a sealed case for this one. Now this one was in Chile, so you got to take a little bit of risk there that it's going to actually make it to you on time or make it to you safely. But the seller did have 100% positive feedback with 92 sales. But how often do you see an uncirculated General Grievous 9.0 with the Boba Fett offer? So AFA graded, and that one sold for $239, free shipping as well. So I hope, you know, if one of y'all bought that, let me know that that arrived to you safe and sound from Chile. But I thought that was a really good deal there for an uncirculated 9.0. And I feel like we saw one of these that admittedly was an unpunched example, same grade, uncirculated 9.0 that sold in an auction. It was, you know, a U.S. seller, so potentially that's why it sold for more, but it sold for quite a bit more than this number. I don't remember the exact number, but I want to say it was $400 plus for an uncirculated General Grievous unpunched as well. So this one was punched, so obviously there's a little bit of a discount there. Going back for that same seller, he had a beautiful foil Clone Commander Cody, Ultimate Galactic Hunt example, U.S. card. That one was listed for $160, and the best offer accepted on that was $150. Again, a very fair price for a foil example. That's right in line, if not below, some of the sales I've seen here recently for the foil VC19 Clone Commander Cody. Jango Fett, we've talked about him at length lately. I found a couple of more sales, and prices continue to stay fairly strong for Jango Fett. This was an unpunched U.S. card that sold in an auction for $137.50, and then there was one other one that was unpunched U.S. card that sold in a buy it now for $159.20. So a couple of big prices there on Jango Fett, holding strong at that price. Same seller, HLS Sales and Auctions, had a U.S. card for Princess Leia in her slave outfit, VC64, and it was unpunched, but it had a little kind of a minor crease there on the hanger tab, but card again was not perfect, a little bit of wave to the card, but overall pretty good shape, and that one sold for $290 plus $8 shipping. Next up, we had a couple of sales for Princess Leia in her in her Sandstorm outfit, this is the Blu-ray deleted scenes. This one had the Darth Maul offer U.S. card. That one sold in an auction for $90.99. So that's down a little bit. If you remember, we found a few of them last week that were kind of $125-ish. So wait for those auctions if you can, if you're looking to kind of fill in your collection, because much better deals on the auctions. And was the card perfect? No, it had a little card wave to it, but overall pretty clean example. Next up was another one, same exact card. This one sold for $113.50. So even this one in an auction that was, you could argue, is in a little bit better shape than the last one I just showed you, still sold for a little bit below where this one has been going for consistently, which was kind of $120 to $150 or so. The Sand Trooper VC12 with the Dirty Paint apps, that one was a punched example that still sold for $150, and I think that the last unpunched example sold closer to $180, $200. So if you're willing to live with a punched example versus the unpunched U.S. card, a little bit better deal on that one. Bib Fortuna Tatooine, so from the Book of Boba Fett, from the Throne Room pack-in, that one sold for $99. That also did include the throne from, inside the box. Pretty good deal there. Now, if you're just looking for Bib Fortuna, the fat Bib Fortuna without this throne room piece, I've seen them go as low as about $80 lately, but that's still a fairly strong number for a fairly recent release. Next up, this was what I did send out to my Patreon supporters, and it was snapped up. It was an unpunched special action figure set. This is the Imperial set with the TIE Fighter pilot, the AT-AT driver, and then Forlom. So I don't know why they include Forlom on that one, but it's just kind of an interesting set. And that one was pretty clean. It was very, very clean box there. And it was only listed for $50. $50, which I thought was a good deal. And the best offer accepted on that was $47. So it only came down $3, but still not a bad deal at all for that special action figure set, just given what some of these usually go for. Jocasta New, this one sold in an auction, and this one still holds its value pretty well. This one included the proof card as well. That one sold for $163. I've seen about, $163, that's kind of the lower end of the range where this one typically goes. $175 to $200 is kind of more typical, but for an auction, that one did go for $163 plus $12 shipping. And then finally, I had just a AFA 9.0 Kylo Ren. This is the only graded figure I wanted to include, but I did want to show this one because it was a gold level Kylo Ren, 8180. And again, it just shows you how the sequel trilogy vintage collection items really have taken a hit, and no one really particularly cares about them, even for the big characters from the sequel trilogy, like Kylo Ren here in high grade. $81. I mean, it costs you probably $50 to $60 after shipping, if not more, to send this into AFA. And the fact that it got it, basically sold for $81 plus $16 shipping, you're basically getting it for grading costs plus the original item. So anyway, I'd be curious, to go back to the front end of this video, I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say after you've had a chance to read the article, and maybe go back and watch my video as well as Victoria's Cantina on this subject about Target electing to drop the vintage collection from their offerings at retail. And is it the first sign that we're going to see more of that maybe at Walmart? Or maybe just that it starts going to like Hasbro Pulse and some of the online fan channels like Big Bad Toy Store and all the others that we all know and love, like Entertainment Earth. So thank you as always for watching, and I'll be back soon.